and explain what you do in shadow accounting. So.
Northern Trust does the shadow for Bridgewater, and we get asked all the time, well, is the entire industry going to go to this full sort of double outsourced model?
Right.
And you know, Bridgewater would like it too, because they like to be on the cutting edge. Right. You know, we haven't seen that, but everybody has to have an answer, right? So if you think about the calling on potential investors and Bridgewater walks out of the room, you need to have an answer. Well, what do? They have this amazing double resilient model. Northern Trust is performing checks every day and all these things that the other administrators doing. You know, what's your answer to that? And so I think that obviously did prompt managers to have an answer. Where we've seen more of the uptick is the really larger managers have said, wait a minute, I do have a data aggregation problem. I might have a managed account with a different administrator. I'm trying to aggregate this together. Maybe people are doing it on Excel. I had a perfectly good investment book of record that works very well with my main administrator, but now I'm getting investors asking for more complex structures, separately managed accounts, managed account platforms. How you pull all that data together and have some sort of consistent view on your performance and what's happening to at the investor level is really a challenge, and it takes a huge investment in technology to be able to do that.
I have a question though. In the real world, how often does the shadow accounting not jibe with what the official accounting is? Is it a common practice that there's a lot of discrepancy, or is it just happens occasionally?
It really depends on how complex the strategy is, how complex the investor structure is. I mean, I think the reality is, you know, we can all provide shadow administration, and so there are good options for managers. What's interesting to me is that the manager's saying, well, that's fine, you can come do the shadow, what else can you provide? And so that's where, for the really complex strategies, if you can provide them really daily data quality, so that then they can actually enhance the trading strategy. And so it's not just, well, I was relying on my administrator to value a significant book of complex, you know, bilateral over-the-counter derivatives or very complex, you know, asset-backed securities. That's the only source I have, and I'm making portfolio decisions every day. That's not as safe as when you have that dual control process on the more agile, you know, active strategies. And so that's where I think we are all competing and responding to our managers saying, well, wait a minute, what else can you do? How can you add value to the front office beyond just what sounds like a very benign shadow, you know, tick and tie function? It's really a drive to get better data quality every day. We're still very much in the dialogue phase. Many investors have asked their managers about this, but not all. And so managers are still in that sort of negotiating a little bit. I mean, look, it's a management company expense. Well, at some point the investors pay for it anyway, and that's exactly what every single investor will tell the manager. But how many of investors? We actually did a survey. 3 out of the 5 big institutional investors want more transparency, but their same managers thought it was more like 1 in 10. So there is still this disconnect where, frankly, investors haven't had enough of these dialogues with their managers to really understand, well, what is shadow? What kind of value-added services? What does it actually mean for me? And managers haven't actually worked to communicate that value proposition to their investors yet either. It's certainly not across the board.
But let's say for a hedge fund manager who's shopping for these services, whether it's shadow accounting or the administrator themselves, should they look at people who do something exactly like the strategy they have? Because it seems so complex, and that, you know, how familiar do you all have to be with what they're doing in order to be a good fit for them as a vendor for these services? What should they be looking for?
I mean, I think every manager's operational model is different, and as much as they might say, oh, I'm a long-short equity fund, or I'm a global macro or a credit fund, I think we would all agree so much of what we do is actually consulting with our clients. What's your future target operating model going to look like? And we sit down and we think through the trade flows and what are your teams doing? What are we doing? What are your counterparties doing? And that's frankly a management consulting project that we undertake with each and every one of our clients through that onboarding process and evolving with the clients as they evolve and they change the scope and structure of their own business. And so, you know, there really isn't one sort of one-size-fits-all solution to, you know, shadow outsourcing or even fund administration or a middle office service. You got to work with each manager and each of their own internal operations and technology models to come up with a solution.